In tonight's episode of Watchmen, actor Yahya Abdul-Mateen II gets his moment to shine, or should I say gets his moment to glow. We find out about Angela and Dr. Manhattan's history, and we're going to talk about that post-credit scene and much more. Episode 8 of Watchmen was titled A God Walks Into a Bar. Angela's mysterious past in Vietnam is at last revealed. What's going on, everybody? Elliot back again with my weekly breakdown, recap, review of the latest episode of Watchmen. And we're talking about the second to last episode, and my mind is still recovering after what I just saw. I don't know what I saw, if it was in the future, if it was in the past, if it was in the present. I don't know. We're going to talk about all that in this spoiler-filled discussion here. But before we dive into this review, definitely consider subscribing to my channel. Hit that bell so you can stay up to date with all my Watchmen review, all my other TV reviews, movie reviews, and all the fun stuff we do on this very channel. And if and when you've seen this episode, you know what you got to do. And I love you all's interactions on these videos. Comment below. Let me know your theories. Let me know your thoughts. How did you enjoy the performance by Yahya? How did you enjoy the reveal? Did you stay towards the end at that post-credit scene? Let's have some discussions in the comments below. So I'm going to try to keep this under 15 minutes if I can, but this was a pretty huge, ambitious, very large, very confusing, very detailed, very meticulous, just great episode of television. This show just amazes me by how week to week this gets better and better and better. Still, episode 6 is probably still sticking to me a little bit closer, but this show is just incredible. The writing, the directing, the acting, like I said, Yahya finally gets his moment to shine. He's been kind of kept under the wraps in this season, but last week we got the reveal, and this week he gets to get his moment to glow on the screen. So let's break it down here, everybody, and let's try to keep this under an hour. So the episode starting off with Dr. Manhattan walking through the streets of Vietnam. He picks up the blue mask. He's going under identity. He doesn't want anyone to bother him, but he gets this sense there's a girl that he's going to fall in love with in a bar that has a sense of loneliness and doesn't want family, as she says on the external, as we know from Angela, but she really wants family. So Dr. Manhattan sits down with Angela, and within the first 45 minutes, we get this interesting conversation had between these two characters where Dr. Manhattan's telling Angela a little bit about himself, about how he perceives time, how he's in the future, in the present, in the past, all at the same time. So he's telling her things like, he's on Mars right now. He's on this planet where he's creating life. She makes a joke. Oh, you're playing God and you're making Adam and Eve. He says, no, I made Adam and Eve in their own skin. I made them in the people that he knew, which we find out in 1936. He went to that matter. He meets Mr. Phillips and Mrs. Crookshanks, and we see them attempting to have sex and want to have kids, and we have that whole conversation about them, about life. And you promised me, John, when you go to America, you're going to create beautiful things in life. And they give him the Bible, influence of him, becoming what we know him as in this timeline as Dr. Manhattan. He tells her, in 10 years they're going to have this tragedy in their relationship, which we'll talk about a little bit later. He mentions to her everything about, Adrian. We find out a little bit about Adrian, which we'll talk about. But again, the first 45 minutes of the show, I am just sitting down watching this show, just jaw on the ground, just completely at awe about the writing and the direction, because this is a very complex episode. Again, this can go over a lot of people's heads, and it went over my head a couple times, but I had to rewind a couple times to kind of capture what they were going for. But it is just such an amazing job that they do in this show in regards to the writing and the directing, and again, the performances on this episode were incredible. So, we find out again about the creation of this planet and who's all there, and we'll talk about Adrian a little bit. But we go back to Angela, telling him the concept and how they met, and she tells him why she hates Dr. Manhattan, as we know from last week's episode. After Dr. Manhattan saves Vietnam, that boy, that village was destroyed, was the one that was responsible for killing Angela's parents, and she kind of explains a little bit of backstory there, and they have that conversation there, and we see how they end up picking Cal's body. He has no relatives. She said that he had a heart attack, I believe, and they pick his body, and immediately, his vocals change and his appearance changed. I thought that was just so cool. And we find out all about that. And again, Dr. Manhattan tells Angela that they will have a 10-year relationship in Tulsa, based on her decision, feeling like, she has family there and becoming a police officer there because she feels it in her bones and it's in her family heritage, as we know from Will, her grandfather. And, they go there. And they have this fight. And Dr. Manhattan, we've seen this in the movie, in the comics, it can be annoying if you knew someone that is a god and can know the future and is in the past and in the present. So they have their argument as Dr. Manhattan's having a conversation about something else that he's having a conversation about later on. Again, complexity to the 10th degree on this episode. But, they have that fight as Dr. Manhattan predicted. So we see a very amazing scene between Dr. Manhattan and Adrian that takes place in the past. So they're talking about, this is the first time Adrian's seeing him in his new appearance. And, they have the conversation about him falling in love and everything of nature. And, we get a little bit of backstory about, Adrian's plans. And he has this kind of regret per se, or he has this type of longing for people to appreciate what he did of saving humanity. So, they have this kind of interesting conversation, which we'll talk about. There's some things about the elephant in the room, or her, he said, how did you know about me being on the planet? He says, a little elephant told me, which, as we know from last week, there was an elephant in that room. I don't know, at first I thought it was like a big joke about animal, elephants having good memory, but it means a little bit more, and we'll talk about that later in the episode. But they have a conversation. Adrian feels like he wants people to know what he did. Dr. Manhattan, says, I want a device to be more human. Adrian tells him, hey, I had a plan A before I tried to kill you, 20 years ago or whatever. And he tells him the A was for amnesia, that he has this device that he can put in his head. He can lose his powers temporarily and not remember who he is. And in exchange for that, Dr. Manhattan grants Adrian paradise. Everyone's assuming and made a theory, including myself, that Adrian was maybe captured or imprisoned on this planet. But no, he willingly went there. But we all know he's kind of sick of it now. But again, we find out in this episode that Adrian willingly went to this paradise. It wasn't in prison per se. So very phenomenal scene there that we get with them. And I just was in awe in that scene. So back to Angela and everything, they have a conversation. Angela brings up something. She says, hey, can you theoretically transfer your powers to someone else? Which we know that might happen in the finale next week with the 7th Cavalry and everything on their plans. But he said, yeah, technically I can, as they were talking about the egg and creating life. So that's something to keep in mind for next week in regards to transferring his powers to someone else. And again, we'll see how that plays out next week. But, I love the moment where, again, she asks him about the time in Tulsa, and he can't talk about it because, again, he doesn't know because of that device is in his head. That's, again, just so smart writing and just great callbacks within this very episode. So I love the moment where Angela and Dr. Manhattan, who's essentially a god, and you have this human, they're wanting to have this relationship, and they're willing to risk knowing that they have this somewhat timestamp on their relationship, that they know in 10 years that something tragic is going to happen, whether it be to Angela, whether it be to John, also known as Dr. Manhattan. I just love that kind of moment. It was kind of like an engagement, him asking her to marry him by putting the ring in his head. It's very, very smart. I know what you guys are doing there. It's very unique and smart writing. I love that moment there. But again, those are the first 45 minutes. And again, I'm just looking at this show just like, this is an amazing television show and such a well-written show. So now we're going into the present timeline. We finally see John in the present of the show somewhat, and he's in his true form because this whole time he's either in the first 45 minutes he's either wearing the mask or he's in the formation, or he's in John's creation there, or not John but Cal. But in the present time we finally see him in the present, glowing, and he has a mixture of Dr. Manhattan's skin and everything in his appearance, but he also looks more like Cal, which I thought was very interesting. We get a call back to the White Knight, where, again, if you guys remember my review from whenever the episode that we saw the flashback of the White Knight, I said, Cal had to do something with the White Knight, and we all know that he did because he was Dr. Manhattan, but he wiped him out. Going back to the conversation that Adrian and Dr. Manhattan had, he said that you can maybe remember your powers if something tragic happens or if you need to make a quick decision, and he wiped out the 7th Cavalry at that moment. So, again, another great callback to that clock being broken from many, many episodes ago and what actually happened on that night. So the kids see their dad, Cal, walking on water. Cal transports them to somewhere safe, which we find out that's in a theater in Tulsa with their grandfather, Will, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But one of the cool things about that moment, I would assume that, that theater is probably the theater that we saw Will in the very first episode. But I love that this really cool moment where we see Will I'm sorry. I'm just still kind of choked up from that amazing episode. We see Will and Dr. Manhattan talking in the past as Dr. Manhattan's talking to Angela in the future. And we have a time paradox where we see Angela ask Dr. Manhattan. Well, before that, Dr. Manhattan tells Will who he is and tells him everything about Angela and this, that, and the other. But then Angela asks Dr. Manhattan to ask Will, how did you know about Judd? And he says, Judd. And in that moment, she set a chain of events of our current timeline of everything that happened to Judd Crawford. And it's a time paradox. So she created this chain of events. Again, I'm just like mind blown at that moment. I love that moment there. So we see Angela ask Doc about him, and again, we find out that the 7th Cavalry is outside. Angela tells Dr. Manhattan, why are you just telling me this now? And she just goes in beast mode. I am so amazed by Regina King in this role as Sister Night. As we know, as Angela Abard, and she is just such a badass. She goes out with her guns. She's taking out the 7th Cavalry left and right. She's, at the moment, I feel like, oh, this is the tragedy. She's going to die. But Dr. Manhattan comes out, wipeouts everyone, and she says, we won. And he says, no, Angela, we haven't won. And one of the 7th Cavalry members turns on the machine and transports him back to where we know the senator is and where Lori, I assume, is, and potentially where Wade is. So I love that moment there, and they use a device on him. So back at the bar, we see that Angela finally agrees to go to dinner with Dr. Manhattan. So again, guys, I just summarize it. I missed a lot of probably integral stuff, but I was so amazed by this episode, and I can't wait to watch it again because I was just like, when you watch something for the first time, especially something that complex, you're soaking as much in as you can, but I'm going to definitely watch it again and probably see things that I missed, and I am just still at awe in that episode. So we get a post-credit scene. So we see the Warden, we see first all the clones, the Phillips and the young lady throwing tomatoes on their face, asking him, hey, do you want to stay? He says no. Do you want to stay? He says no. So we see him in his cell there, and the Warden comes in, and we find out that the Warden is the very first creation that Dr. Manhattan made, and he talks about all the different people, and he's been there since the beginning, and he tells him, we see Adrian say that he wants to go back home, he wants to return, he wants to see his 8 billion children, and he leaves the cake there. And then we notice that the cake has a horseshoe in it, and I assume that's going to be Adrian's escape. So let's talk about it again. I think that Yahya did a phenomenal job in this episode. Again, he's been kind of in the background of the show, and last week's reveal was huge, and now we got to see him perform and playing Dr. Manhattan. This guy is such a great actor. I remember seeing him earlier this year in a smaller role in Get Out, us seeing him in Black Manta and Aquaman, and I've seen him in some other things before, but I'm so glad that he's starting to get the opportunities because he's a great actor. I think he's a great actor, and I'm excited to see him in this role and see him in Candyman next year and in other future roles in the DC universe. I think he's a hell of an actor, and I'm glad he was able to get the platform and the opportunity to play Dr. Manhattan. He killed this role, as well as Angela and Adrian. Jeremy Irons is so great. I am in love with this episode and can't watch it again. So can't wait to watch it again. So let's talk about some questions before we end this video here. We talked about the elephant in the room, and we saw that Adrian says to Dr. Manhattan, I heard it from an elephant, and it goes back to the episode last week when we saw Angela in the room with the elephant. What does that mean? What is the significance there? I know some people have looked up Lady True's, like the name of Lady True, and she was like a warrior who rode and saved people on an elephant. I'm wondering, is that going to play out next week? Let me know you guys' theories on what that elephant can mean in next week's finale. Why did Angela have to see Dr. Manhattan standing on the pool, on the water? He says this is important. Let me know your theories of why he said that to her and what that could mean to next week. Again, we see the game warden giving off the anniversary cake to Adrian, leaving the horseshoe in there. Again, this is kind of a callback to one of the first episodes where we saw the clones giving him, he'd asked for a knife, but they gave him something else. So is that intentional? Are the clones trying to help him? Are they making a mistake like they did when they gave him the cake the first time? Let me know your theories on that. Lady True's dad, we didn't get the identity from him. Some people like myself last week in different comments that I was interacting with you all here on Facebook and all the different things I'm attached to on the Watchmen universe. I thought it was maybe the comedian. Some people are assuming that it is Adrian. It could be Dr. Manhattan. Who knows? Let me know your theories below, who you think Dr. or Lady True's dad is. Lube Man, who is Lube Man? We haven't seen him in a couple weeks. Are we going to get him saving the day and being the true hero of this universe next week? Let Let me know who you guys think it is. A lot of people think it's Detective Petty, and I think it's him as well, but we'll see next week. Wade, it was Wade going to save the day in the cavalry mask that he took 2 episodes ago, and see what happens there. And is Dr. Manhattan dead? I don't think he is. I think they just captured him at that moment. I don't think that was a moment of him dying, but we'll see. Next week is the finale. Tick-tock, tick-tock, episode 9 of Watchmen. Again, I've been loving the season, loving the show. Again, this show just gets better with time, like a fine wine. I'm very excited about next week's finale, but at the same time, we haven't gotten official confirmation from Damien if there's going to be a season 2. I'm okay with it being like kind of a leftovers approach where we get maybe 2 or 3 seasons of this show and maybe different characters in different areas of the world. But I want a season 2 so bad. But before we even talk about that, we'll talk about the next week. We got one more episode, season finale of Watchmen. I'm so excited for it. So thank you all for watching this review. Again, comment below. Let me know your theories, your thoughts, your pros, your cons. Let me know all your thoughts on this very episode and what you're hoping to see in the finale of next week. Subscribe to my channel. Hit that bell so you can stay up to date with all my content. Got a lot of stuff coming up this upcoming week with reviews, trailer reactions, and all that fun stuff. And also make sure you check out all my other reviews that I did over the weekend with all the, the Mandalorian, Castle Rock, all the stuff on Apple TV Plus. Movies like I reviewed Honey Boy, Little Women, and Marriage Story, so check out those reviews. Follow us on all of our social media accounts. Again, thank you for watching this review. Can't wait to talk about the finale next week with you all. But thank you guys again for watching this video, and we'll see you next week.